And now I ask Archbishop Vigano directly about his excommunication and whether he considers himself to be excommunicated, why or why not. Archbishop Vigano explains, he says, on June 11th, 2024, so this year, I was informed by a simple email without ever receiving any official notification of a canonical trial against me. I was told that if I wish to oppose the accusations made against me, I need to appear in Rome just 9 days later on June 20th, or else to submit my written defense by June 28th, the vigil of the feast of Saints Peter and Paul. I do not believe that such a short time to prepare one's defense. It is given even if you just get a parking ticket. The charges brought against me are completely inconsistent. I am accused of schism for having questioned the legitimacy of Bergoglio and for having rejected Vatican II. But the law recognizes the non-applicability of the will or intention to commit schism in the case in which the accused person is persuaded that the one who sits on the throne of Peter is not the Pope, and where the groundlessness of his suspicions is demonstrated, is willing to submit to his authority. So I'm going to pause here. There's a lot there. What Archbishop Vigano is saying here is, according to the law, according to his read on it, if someone is persuaded that the one who sits on the throne of Peter is not the Pope, and there are grounds for that, it's not groundless, and he, if convinced otherwise, would submit to his authority, then the penalty does not apply. He goes on to say, I consider Jorge Maria Bergoglio an anti-pope, or better said, a counter-pope, a usurper, an emissary of the anti-Catholic lobby that has infiltrated the church for decades. The evidence that he is completely alien to the papacy, his multiple heresies, and the coherence of his subversive acts of government and, scare quotes, magisterium, are very serious elements that cannot be hastily dismissed. And of course, if you watch this podcast, we've covered many of those things, the Pachamama and some of the statements, many of the statements and actions. Vigano says, regardless of the method and merit of the extrajudicial canonical case, the vacancy of the apostolic see and the usurpation of the throne of Peter by a false pope render all the acts of the Roman dicasteries completely void of validity and efficacy. So even the excommunication against me is null. Here, Archbishop Vigano has listed the two reasons why he believes he's not excommunicated. First off, canon law would release him from that penalty based on the condition I read from him above. Secondly, he just says Francis isn't the Pope. So any extrajudicial canonical case is null and void. End of story. He then says, we are faced with a canonical short circuit. The one who holds the supreme earthly authority in the church, at the moment in which he is denounced for heresy, responds by accusing of schism the one who denounces him and excommunicates him. This instrumental use of justice, typical of dictatorships, says Vigano, contradicts the mens, or the mind, of the legislator, and rightly falls under what is foreseen by the bull of Paul IV. It is the very adhesion to heresy that expels the heretic from the church and renders his authority illegitimate, invalid, and null. Here he is referring to the bull of Pope Paul IV, and it states that any cleric who is a heretic cannot assume church office, can't become a bishop, can't become an archbishop, can't become a cardinal, and even says cannot become a pope. That the adhesion to heresy makes it impossible for a man to be appointed to a church office. And Archbishop Vigano is citing this here from Pope Paul IV and saying Bergoglio is a heretic, and therefore it is impossible for him to assume the papacy. So that's the question on excommunication. The next question, number 5. Who are the most dangerous men in the Vatican right now? Archbishop Vigano says, after Bergoglio, the most dangerous are Cardinal Fernandez, Ulrich, Roche, Peña. And you'll remember that Cardinal Fernandez, here he is, Cardinal Fernandez, he's the one who wrote the book, Heal Me with Your Mouth, The Art of Kissing, where he talks about kissing a witch. He has another book that also has some erotic material. He is the prefect. He is the head of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of Faith, and he is the one who penned the excommunication or the notification of excommunication to Archbishop Vigano. And we've covered him quite a bit here on the Dr. Taylor Marshaall podcast. I'm not a huge fan. I think it's safe to say I'm not a huge fan of Cardinal Fernandez, and I think he's a Jesuit, and I think his appointment by Bergoglio reveals some major problems in the mind and in the theology of Bergoglio. I mean, why would you appoint this man who's writing this kind of trash to be in charge of all the dogma, all the doctrines, and all the morality in the Catholic Church? It's comical. So Vigano lists Fernandez, of course, and let me get it back on here. Ulrich, Roche is now in charge of liturgy and sacraments. He's the prefect. Peña. These men together with the Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, are all accomplices in the disastrous management of the Vatican and the entire church, says Vigano. I recall in passing that Parolin was a member of the network of the second section of the Secretariat of State, at that time headed by the Freemason Silvestrini, a leading member of the St. Gallen Mafia, to whom he owes his rise.